Okay. And so for today's session, we are doing Welcome Wednesday, Grad School Glow Up, Transform Your Application. And today we have Tyler Kowalski from Vanderbilt University. So I will let him take it away. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me today. Also, a shameless plug, I will be at that grad fair on the 20th. So if you like what I'm saying today and you want to talk about more of our programs, get some Vanderbilt swag, just say hi. I'll be there, and I'm super excited to talk to you guys because the UCF population is one of my favorite to work with. Your guys' student population is just so committed to this idea of academic success, and that's why year in, year out, we will always be there. So it's something I always look forward to every single year. But yeah, so I'm here today to talk to you guys about your grad school glow up, transforming your application. And beyond the concept of a glow up, I promise I won't try and use any other slang. There's no skibbity or cap or anything like that involved in this entire presentation because the rest of my students just told me I'm too old for that. But what we will talk today is we will go through a little bit of everything. So I'm the assistant director of graduate admissions at Vanderbilt. So of course I have to talk to you a little bit about Vanderbilt, let you know what we've got going on, kind of what we're about, and then what you should know for your if you're deciding on us for your graduate home. But then beyond that, we're going to take a little bit of a different approach than some of you might be anticipating for this kind of conversation. Yes, we are going to be talking about what makes a good statement of purpose, how do you stand out as a candidate, all of that stuff. But I think the best way you can transform your application is to have a full, comprehensive understanding about what in the world you're applying to. So, what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about the foundation, building a self-understanding and understanding of graduate school so that you know what to apply to and what they're going to be looking for. We're going to talk about the actual application process, so step by step, key mistakes, tips and tricks along the way for all of your critical material, things like your statement of purpose, your letter of recommendation, all of that good stuff. And then lastly, we will talk about becoming a quality candidate. Because just like with everything in the world, there's things you can do to help yourself stand out. And so we'll talk about what you can do from a first year perspective, what you can do from a second year, third year, fourth year, and make sure you're becoming the cream of the crop candidate that you want to be. And then lastly, I'm an expert in this field. My role is to get students into graduate school and help prepare them for graduate school application. And so I wanted to leave some time at the end of this for a few questions. So nothing's off limits. If you want to get in anything, give me a holler. And anything that we don't cover today, I'm more than happy to talk about when I'm on campus in a couple of weeks. Just a few things. Again, my name is Tyler, Assistant Director. If you ever need to contact me, all of my stuff is right there. Email is usually the best thing, but I'm more than happy to kind of set up meetings. So if you want to have a virtual chat, one-on-one, coordinate something with a program that you might be interested in, let me know directly, and I'm more than happy to help in that regard. A little bit about me, because I think you should know who's presenting to you at all times. I'm from upstate New York. I had to leave because I don't like to be cold. And so it doesn't really snow as much in Nashville as my hometown. So I found a great place here. I've been in Vanderbilt since 2022, primarily working in admissions, but I also did used to run the PhD program of chemistry from a coordination standpoint. All of my degrees are in political science. So if you want to talk about politics and policy, I'm your dude. But all you need to know is I love what I do. My whole premise and my whole purpose is connecting students with their next best opportunity. And if you're involved in any sort of summer research, McNair, general student recruitment, you're likely to see me. So if you have questions, by all means, please reach out. In terms of Vanderbilt as an institution, we are located in Nashville, Tennessee. We affectionately are referred to as Music City, USA, because you can't go anywhere without finding live music on the street or your favorite artist performing. I've seen everybody from T-Pain to Noah Khan, in this town. It's quite a fun. In terms of our campus, we are smack dab in the middle of the city, but we are a 300-acre protected arboretum. What that means is there's more squirrels than people on our campus, and there are no through lanes of traffic. So once you're on our campus, even though we share a street with Broadway, you don't know you're in the middle of a city because there's this serenity and this peacefulness that we have. And if you're looking for something to do, which I hope you do something different than just your research all the time, depending on what you want, we've got it. I'm a big foodie, so in terms of our campus dining and local dining options, I don't know as if there's a better food city that I've ever lived in. A lot of our groups provide different outings and campus events. Depending on what your background is, we've got a variety of different identity groups on campus, everything from first gen to military to LGBTQI plus. We've got the Women's Center, all of these amazing things to make sure that you have a place here at Vanderbilt. And then we're also Division One athletics in the SEC. We are slowly becoming a football school. We are 5-1 now. We did beat Alabama last year, not this year, unfortunately. But we've also seen success everywhere from winning a national title in women's bowling all the way to baseball. And so there's a really wonderful sporting environment if that's something that you're interested in. And if you're not, you can avoid it entirely. And then in terms of our general enrollment, we have about 14,000 people on campus. Half of that will be undergraduate. About 2,400 to 2,500 will be graduate students in the programs that I represent. And then the remaining students are what we call professional students. So that would be people doing their MD, their business degree, their JD, anything like that. In terms of our student to faculty ratio, for all programs, it's about 7-1. And what that means is you're going to have the benefit of being a highly ranked and competitive institution, but with an individualized approach and whatever resource you might need in the moment. And wherever you end up globally, we've got alumni there. We have more than 150,000 active participants in our alumni network with 44 chapters representing multiple countries globally. What does Vanderbilt consist of? Well, we have a variety of entities. The graduate school, that's me, and the 59 programs that I represent. But we also have separate entities within our law school, School of Management, School of Medicine, College of Education, and the School of Nursing. And then all the programs that I manage are housed within the College of Arts and Science, School of Engineering, Divinity, a handful of programs within education and nursing, and then we also work in tandem with our Office of Postdoctoral Affairs. Couple more slides on Vanderbilt, then we'll get into the fun stuff. But these are all the programs that we offer. Primarily, we are a PhD R1 research institution, so most of our programs, 49 of them, are PhDs. We offer Masters of Arts, Masters of Science, a Master of Fine Arts, and then an MLAS. In terms of our master's program, that is primarily going to be within the field of engineering. And then we also offer a handful of other affiliated programs with different colleges. And then what do we stand for? We're about three things that I really like to highlight. Collaboration and innovation, because we understand that your research and its real world applications do not happen in a little box. We know that if you are studying biomolecular engineering, you might need to interface with somebody at the med school, or maybe somebody at the law school, or even somebody in philosophy to talk about an ethical concern. And so we put all of our time and a lot of our money into these interdisciplinary initiatives so that you can have real life impacts in your research. Beyond that, we understand that graduate school, just like anything worth doing, is difficult. And because of that, we provide as much resource to our students as we possibly can. So what that means is you have access to a student care network, you have access to academic services, you have access to outside grants and funding opportunities, and you are given every opportunity to express your own voice, be that as part of the Graduate Student Council or just expressing it to your mentors and greater leadership community. And then on the topic of leadership, our goal is to always be a leader in the field and change with the times. So we've been in operation for over 150 years. What we did 100 years ago is a little different than what we're doing right now and what is going to be happening in another 100 years. And so we always have our thumb on the pulse and we see what our students need, what our community needs, and what greater academia needs. So we make sure that we're providing that in real time. All this to say, guys, I love Vanderbilt. I love my job. I don't know as if I've ever been at the multitude of institutions that I've worked at somewhere where students are so highly prioritized. And that's something that's going to help you in your graduate school endeavor more than anything else. So be that at Vanderbilt or be that elsewhere, find somewhere that you're going to be supported. So let's talk about finding somewhere because that's why you guys are here to glow up your graduate application. So I like to start with this idea of setting a foundation and thinking about what you should need to know before you start. When I say that, too often students start thinking about, do I need to know university rankings? Do I need to know funding? Do I need to know all of this stuff? And yes, we want as much information as possible, but we need to start at the most forgotten thing in this entire process, and that is you. Students do not think about themselves and their fit with schools before they think about the prestigious institution or what funding might be offered or something like that. But you got to remember, you are looking for somewhere that you will fit. And I keep coming back to this concept of you because we need to know what is your why. What's going to drive you when things get difficult. And your why needs to be yours. It can't be because my mom, dad, grandma told me I have to do this, or my cousin got a PhD and I have to do it because they did it. It should be centered in what brings you joy, what brings you and gives you purpose. So if that's helping your community, awesome. If that's becoming a professor of your own, that could be making as much money as possible. That could be working at Raytheon and building a bomb. It doesn't matter what that looks like for you. It just matters that it's yours. Similarly, you want to take stock of what your skills are. What do you have right now that is marketable? What do you have right now that makes you stand out among other people? And then on the flip side, where can you grow? What opportunities do you have to become a better academic, a better scholar, and a better human being? And that's important because one, it will help guide you as to what you need to work on in preparation for your application. But your areas of growth are also something you can use to sell yourself to a program. If you've done the research and you know that you want to be more statistically apt, and this program has a great history of producing statisticians, you can talk about why you want to join that program because it will make you more well-rounded. So we can turn all of this into a strength. And so that's where I like you guys to kind of take stock of the things inherent to you. And then as we look into that, we go in from these things that make us to the things that we need to be as successful as possible. So I like to ask you guys to think about two things. The first concept is what I call a deal breaker. So this is a must have for you to be successful in graduate school. This could be location based. This could be you need to have a mentor who is not going to micromanage you. This could be you want to be close to home, something that is going to be the reason you pick somewhere or the reason you decide against it. Beyond that, think about some things that we call needle movers, things that are going to help sway your decision. So, is your favorite grocery store within walking distance to campus? Do you spend your free time rock climbing and they have a gym? Things that will help you make decisions when you're looking at similarly ranked options, but I'm hoping you don't pick an institution if they have a rock wall or not. But these are just nice things to have. And then once we know ourselves, we can then start to figure out about what's going to be asked of us. But we need to know ourselves because that is the most important thing. Because if you're somewhere that is not set up for your success, it's a very difficult experience to get through. So let's talk for a second. I want these to be a little interactive. So I've got two questions. Um, First and foremost, is anyone comfortable sharing their why? What makes you interested in grad school? Why do you want to do it? Please, anybody. And you can feel free to raise your hand or just come off mute. I'll tell you mine while we're waiting for you guys to articulate. But for me, my why is I want to provide as much opportunity to people that I possibly can. My background as a first generation undergrad, first generation graduate student meant that I went through a lot of this process with my blinders on because I didn't know what was happening. And so my goal is to help as many people with a similar background who might be a little lost get through this process. And that's my why. That's why I'm here today.
Thank you. Some students are sharing them in the chat. So if you
Awesome.
were to read them out loud or if you want me to, whatever you'd like to do.
I will go ahead now that I see that. Sorry, I wasn't paying
Thank
attention to the
you.
chat. Good reminder. So we've got some that are talking about I want to go into research. We've got a passion for helping patients, being an advocate, which is huge. A lot of research talk, people talking about their own history with dealing with autoimmune disorders and things like that. And I love it. I mean, even something like getting a promotion, upskill, becoming more knowledgeable. You guys are all along the same page in the sense that it's all I, it's all me, it's all that kind of why. So I love that. Um, Kind of moving on, and feel free to put it in the chat as well if I can get this to keep going. Here we go. Who wants to share an example of a deal breaker? What do you need to be successful from a mentor, from an institution, anything like that?
I can share a deal breaker.
Please.
For me, a deal breaker going into grad school was that it was a good environment and that it was not like a competitive or um, kind of like hostile environment among students. So community was a important one for me.
That is huge too. And that's a really good kind of segue into the discussion of trying to figure things out at the graduate school level. We've got one in the chat talking about supportive research team, looking at a school that's diversity focused and a good environment for students of color. All of these things are important because it's what you might need to feel successful. And if we don't have these deal breakers, we're not putting ourselves at the best chance of success. So I know it's kind of hard putting everyone on the spot, especially right now in the morning. But think about these things and think about these things before you even think about what school to go to, because this will help guide those decisions. As we kind of move forward, we're going to talk about understanding what graduate school is. So if we're looking at this foundation like a pyramid, we've set this base level, which you need to know you before you do anything. The next thing is understanding what you're applying to. So thinking about, do you understand what grad school is? Do we understand what makes a master's different from a PhD? They're not just going to more school. The big three things that I like to talk about are timeline, funding, and becoming Dr. You. So if you're going into a master's program, it's usually, depending on the program, a 1 to 3 year ordeal. That from the funding standpoint, aside from scholarships and maybe some external things that you obtain on your own, is largely tuition driven by yourself. So you might have to take out loans, you might have to pay things out of pocket. And while you do graduate with qualification, certification, a bunch of letters after your name and things like that, it does not provide that doctor side of things. Whereas a PhD provides fully funded nature. So at Vanderbilt, for instance, if you get into a PhD program, we guarantee your funding for 5 years, which comes with a stipend of upwards of $38,000 a year, 100% of your tuition paid for, and all fees, as well as a moving allowance, for a total of about $500,000 that we provide to you over 5 years. But that timeline is much longer. It's 5 plus. Some programs might operate 6, 7, 8, depending on the industry and depending on the research you want to do. But at the end of that, when you are conferred your degree, you become Dr. You. So if that is important to you, maybe consider looking into a PhD either in lieu of a master's or following a master's, because that will vary depending on program and industry. Both of them share the same thing, that they're going to ask you to grow from what we call a scholar, which all of you are right now, to an academic. As a scholar, and I'm assuming if you are thinking of graduate school, you're a successful scholar at this point, or a pretty darn good one. But most of what you're doing is being taught material and proving that you're engaging with it in some capacity. So you're taking a test, you're writing a paper, you're participating in discussions, but by and large, it is just you saying, "Hey, I got this. Give me the next thing." As an academic, things change because it's going from more of this regurgitory to more of a creationary mindset. So you're going to be asked to be a self-starter, you're going to be asked to be a self-advocate, but at the end of the day, in your thesis, in your dissertation, you're going to solve a problem or contribute to the literature, likely in a way that no one has ever done before. And that is a little overwhelming at times because there's no framework or lesson plan to write your own dissertation, but it's also a lot of fun. And as an academic, you have much more of a say in your programming. You have a much more of a say in your day. After your first 2 years as a PhD student, you're done with classes and you're largely just doing research. And that can be fun, but that can be overwhelming. But it's going to ask you to change and grow in different ways. Um, Looking as well, we need to understand that within graduate education, there's a significant amount of variability, significantly more so than undergrad. So you'll see that, if you're going to undergrad at UCF and you're going to undergrad at Harvard, that political science program they're largely going to have similar beats. You might have cool classes and different requirements, but you're going to cover specific material that every single person has to cover. Whereas with a graduate school, that's where you get so much specificity in your specific program that even within institutions, things can change. Our biomedical engineering program is going to be entirely different than Columbia's, and that's going to be entirely different than our civil engineering program in our same campus, even though it's in the same college. So just make sure you're doing specific outreach. And when doing all that information gathering, we're doing it specific to the programs that we will be applying to. And then I like to kind of talk about things that, graduate school are going to ask of you. The skill sets, number one, it's going to be time management. If you're not staying on top of your things, it becomes very difficult. Does anyone either in the chat or in the room want to guess about the second most important skill set as a graduate student? I'm looking at the chat too over here. Y'all, and I've taught online for years, so I'm comfortable sitting in silence. All right. Hey, well, schedule planning. It's a great idea, great option. I think it's very important. But I would say, in my opinion, the second most important thing is time management. And I see Jessica just guessed our third one, which would be networking and engagement. Jessica, that's incredibly important. It's something we'll talk about, but I still think that the third most important thing is time management. And then I'm going to let somebody else in the chat or coming off mute guess what the fourth most important thing in terms of a skill set that graduate school is going to ask of you. I see we've got, there's my guy. Michael's got great pattern recognition, but you need to remember that you don't know everything because you got to check that ego at the door as we move forward. But seriously, I know that's a bit of a joke. I still think time management is the most important thing. Beyond that, there's these concepts of self-starting and self-advocacy. Like we talked about, you're going to be more creationary in your approach, but you have to get off the couch and do it. You're going to be in charge of your own schedule. You're going to be in charge of your own progress. And so that's fun in a sense, but you're not going to have that syllabus. You're not going to have that schedule of classes that keeps you in line. You're also going to need to work on being a self-advocate and utilizing your resources. There is a common problem that happens with graduate students because if you're getting into graduate school, particularly if you're getting into competitive programs like at Vanderbilt, you've probably been a really good student for quite a long time. And you have an amazing array of skill sets, but you need to work on asking for help. Gifted students have trouble with that specific endeavor because we've never had to do that. It is not bad. It does not reflect negatively on you. And all of those things are there for you to utilize to be successful because the goal is to get that degree. The goal is not to get that degree and ask as few questions as possible. And no one cares at the end of the day if you have a PhD or a master's, how many times you went to career services, how many times you met with your mentor, because they're there to help you. Part of this is going to ask you to limit your ego, kind of that idea of you don't know everything, don't try to know everything. And then lastly, self-care. We need to make sure we are not solely doing our academic endeavor all the time. Have hobbies, enjoy your free time, take breathers, take time off, and remind yourself that you can do it. And you'll notice none of those skill sets say be a genius, burn yourself out, work till midnight every single night, because you shouldn't have to do that all the time. If you follow these kind of skill sets, you will set yourself up for success as effectively as possible. So that is kind of setting the foundation of what you need to know for you, what you need to know as a graduate school kind of master's PhD level. And now we're going to actually get into the application process. So when we're gathering this information, you want to know what we need to know from the institution. I usually recommend that you make a spreadsheet. That way you can compare and contrast everything you might need to. The first sheet of this spreadsheet should be all about you. The first thing you see when you log into this, whatever mechanism you're using, Google Doc, Excel, anything like that, should be what is driving you. Remind yourself that you are at the center of this process, the main character and the most important person. consider creating some sort of rubric, 1 out of 5 stars, 1 out of 10, this, something like that, A through F grades, anything you can do to compare things so it's not overwhelming in that regard. And then you want to at least look for specific institution and program information. Things like location, app deadlines, fees, enrollment, cohort size. How many students are getting their PhDs? Is it a program that brings in 75 people a year and 10 of them earn a degree? Or is it a program that brings in 4 and they all get that degree? Look at your faculty of interest if they're accepting students. And then also anything that might set them aside, good or bad. Do they have special requirements? Do they have interesting programs? Do they have a cool NMR machine or something like that that piques your interest? All this is very important for you to look at. In terms of common application requirements and what you can expect to be putting into your application, and we're going to cover every single one of these step by step, but you're going to be doing things like a statement of purpose, letters of rec, providing transcripts, submitting fees, and you may have any sort of requirements for test scores, writing samples, resumes, stuff like that. So that is the foundation. I know it's kind of a lot of information, so I wanted to take a beat and just see before we get into the actual step-by-step application process, did anyone have any questions about finding further understanding within themselves or graduate school? Okay. By all means, put those questions in the chat if you have them. Raise your hand. I can pause, but at the end, we'll have about 15 minutes for us to go over everything as well. So getting into the application process, which is the main reason everybody is here. We've talked about it before, but just a reminder, it's very different than undergrad, and this is going to vary by degree type. Master's admissions are different than PhD admissions. Institution type, large school, small school, public, private, and also funding models. Some schools might operate where you have to have a faculty mentor set up previously. Some might have you talk about them, maybe do a rotation with several faculty when you arrive. So get a sense of what those all are going to look like. But in terms of generalities, applications are primarily going to be a fall term endeavor. Most of them will open in and around August, August 1st here at Vanderbilt, and close in and around the winter break. Generally speaking, the latest standard deadline, at least at Vanderbilt, is February 15th, and we've got maybe 1 or 2 programs that have that. Most of them are between November 1 and December 1 as their deadlines. And these are incredibly important deadlines because you have such a long time and because of the commitment we're making to you and any graduate program is making to you. Generally, unless there's an insane extenuating circumstance, exceptions to this rule are not granted. And then also be on the lookout for priority deadlines. Some places, such as our engineering school, will provide you an application fee waiver or priority review if you apply before a certain deadline. Breaking that down, PhD to master's, everything we just talked about is largely in the PhD space. Most of these programs will come with about $100 application fee, and these are fully funded. So the least we can do is be on time with that. In terms of master's level admissions, these will usually be for both fall and spring, whereas PhDs are only fall in most scenarios. Sometimes there's summer, but mostly what you'll see here is with master's programs, the application deadlines are a little bit later. Some might even be rolling, and they provide you a little bit more flexibility in your actual opportunities. So some PhD programs might even do what they call deny recommend, which is, hey, you were just below what we needed for a PhD student, or we didn't have funding or something like that, but we think you'd be a great candidate for a master's program that could even lead into your eventual PhD admission. So make sure you're being as open to all opportunities as possible. And I see that we have a question in the chat about the difference between a statement of purpose and a letter of motivation. And we'll kind of get to that when we talk about our actual statement of purpose breakdown, but they're largely the same thing. If there's any sort of difference, it should be outlined in the prompt. But if you have any questions as it pertains to the requirements for a specific school, that's another great opportunity for you to reach out. This isn't looking up letter of motivation Reddit on Google. It's talking to that institution's coordinator or something like that to see what they're specifically looking for. But by and large, statement of purpose, letter of motivation, personal statement are all interchangeable terms. When you're applying, like we've talked about previously, anticipate having to submit an application fee, anticipate a statement of purpose, personal statement, letter of motivation, anticipate 3 to 5 letters of rec, submitting your transcripts, and if we have any international students in here, English proficiency tests. Other non-standard items you can expect, some programs, particularly in the fine arts and English, will require writing samples, or for STEM, if you have any publications. CVs and resumes are becoming increasingly popular. And then also, due in part to the rise of generative AI, a lot of schools are pivoting towards a short answer or live writing demonstration, mostly because they want to make sure students are accurately representing their own voices and experience. And on that topic, guys, read what schools are saying about generative AI. Every school will have a different policy, but by and large, it outlines that it should be not creationary, it should only be editorial. So things like Grammarly, things like Google Translate, running it through ChatGPT for flow and things like that, totally fine. But don't feed it a prompt, feed it your resume, and spit out a letter, because if schools find out that you have done that, a lot of schools have policies against using generative AI in your application. So just be aware of that. Looking at the statement of purpose, and this is going to kind of get more down to Jessica's question, but let's break it down. So this, to me, is the single most important thing that you'll put into your application, but it's also the single thing that I think students in this kind of admission cycle of the last few years are least equipped to produce. And the reason I think it's very difficult for you guys is this kind of generation of students has been taught to think very critically about themselves. If I asked you to write me a paper about everything you would improve about yourself or could do better, I think I'd have 27 books at my desk by the morning. But if I asked you to give me 500 words while you're great, that would take all day. And so we need to get very comfortable talking about ourselves, specifically talking about ourselves in a positive manner, because that's what this is. This is your best, in some case, only chance to tell your story and show them how amazing you are. But this is not just your CV with more words. This should not read like, I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this, admit me. What it is roughly 2 pages in length, speaking specifically at least to these 3 things. Why are you pursuing this field? What have you done to prepare for this pursuit? And then why this specific program at this specific institution? It's not the regurgitation of your CV. It is not you outlining your history haphazardly, and it's not this one size fits all thing. You will have certain things that will transfer over from every letter that you write. Your intro, probably the same. The reason you want to do chemistry as a PhD student, probably the same. But that last part is where you're going to make it specific to the institution. This is how you show them where and how you fit into the program. And then everything that you're talking about in this statement needs to relate back to how it prepared you for that specific program. So if you had a job you loved in the summer, my favorite job I ever had in the summer in college was working at a summer camp. Unfortunately, that is not really going to help you prepare for research. So if you're going to mention it, you need to be asking yourself, how can I relate it back to this application? If you can't, or if it's a bit of a stretch, move on to the next most appropriate thing. Also, some of you might be in this room worried about, I don't have research experience. Freshman year, first semester, I got sick, had a family emergency, got in a car crash, had a concussion, doesn't matter what it might be, and you had a tough semester. You failed a couple courses. You did all of this kind of stuff. Your statement is where you get in front of those things. Your statement is where you take that thing that might have been a really tough experience and you flip it on its head and you show that you have a level of self-awareness and you're making this a strength. Yes, I had a really tough sophomore year, first semester. I got a 1.8 GPA. I was put on probation, but that made me realize that I wanted to change my major. I retook those classes. I showed this initiative and drive, and that's why you should admit me, because I will persevere over challenges. And so the worst thing you can do is not mention these things and hope they go unnoticed. If you address it head on, that shows a level of professionalism and maturity that not a lot of students are going to represent. Um, Beyond that, the next most important thing that you're going to have in your application is your letters of recommendation. What they are is where an expert in the field talks to an expert about you. It's a chance for someone else to back up everything that you've been saying in your application, and it's something to add to your story, but it's not the totality of it. So I don't want you to stress incredibly over what these may say, as long as you trust your letter writers and you go through some of the tips that we've had that we'll go into in the next slide. Before we even talk about those tips, though, who should we ask? Well, first and foremost, they need to be industry and field specific who can talk to your research and academic capabilities. These are people like industry researchers, your mentors, faculty advisors, faculty members that you've had for multiple classes, but they are not what I like to call character witnesses. Going back to that summer job I had, my boss and I had a wonderful relationship. If I was applying to a job, they'd be a wonderful reference. But if I was applying to be a PhD scholar in political science, unfortunately, they can't talk to those capabilities, and it would be a waste of your and their time to use them as a reference. So, as much as you can, let's work on having them industry and field specific and building that network out as much as possible. Key mistakes that students make with the letters of rec, um, and I know it sounds silly, but you need to make sure that they like you. You need to get comfortable asking, are you comfortable providing me a positive letter of recommendation by this specific date? What happens is too many students get worried. Um, they don't have a great network and they just go title chasing. That's the chair of the department. That's a dean. I had a class with them freshman year. I'll go ask them. And I know it might sound crazy, but as someone who reads thousands of statements a year, 10 to 15% of them are kind of middling. I don't know this student very well. I didn't really have them. They got a C in this one class. I think they asked me because I'm the chair, and things like that. So we want to make sure you have this positive relationship with them. And providing that hard deadline is very useful because faculty, particularly popular faculty, are very, very busy. And so we want to make sure that we are getting out in front of that and providing them a clear guideline so that they get this information to us effectively. When we're looking at these letters, tips and tricks, start this early. Build your relationships now. Even if you're a first year, go talk to somebody that you might want to use as a letter writer and ask them about themselves. Ask them what you can do to follow their footsteps. Build that rapport. And remind yourself that you don't want to be the last person doing this, because if they miss that letter, it's just as good as you never submitting your application. Um, Make sure when you're requesting this, you offer to meet with them, go over your CV and talk about what you want to be mentioned. It should not directly overlap with your statement of purpose. So kind of talk about where they can help fill in some of those gaps. And then also provide a token of thanks. Show up with a Starbucks coffee, write them a nice card, send them an email, a nice letter. It doesn't have to be anything wild and crazy and expensive, but this is how you foster that relationship. So yes, they'll be your recommender when you're going into grad school, but maybe you need them as a recommender when you're looking for your postdoc or first teaching opportunity. And you want to keep that as a strong relationship, and everyone appreciates a thanks. And then if you are doing any research, either at your home institution or externally, you need to have them as a letter writer. It is an incredibly big red flag if a student has done a research placement and does not have the person writing them a letter. And admissions committees will fill in the blanks there about your ability to build those relationships and have that rapport. I see we got another question from Jessica in the chat. Thank you. But what about a professor you worked with as a teaching assistant for multiple semesters? I think that is a wonderful relationship. And I think that is a perfect thing to have as a letter writer, because they can talk to your academic capabilities, your personal capabilities, and then also your ability to kind of work in that team and classroom dynamic, which, depending on which route you want to take for graduate school, can be incredibly beneficial. So that is an A plus 10 out of 10 person to use as a letter writer. And then some of the more logistic stuff for the application. Most of them cost. Most of them cost about $100. If you apply to places like Vanderbilt, you pay once and you can actually apply to two programs. So your second one is free. So look for deals like that. But if you don't pay it, it's just as good as not submitting it. So that is why we need to be very targeted because it doesn't make any sense to apply to 19 schools when you're uncertain about all of them. Find the 5 to 10 that you really like, get those applications out. But definitely do not just apply to 1 or 2 schools because you want to have a wide swath there. How do you get a waiver? Well, you ask. That's the number one thing that you got to do. Send out a million emails. Do not send one email and CC 17 different admissions committees because I've gotten several of those, and that doesn't bode well for your chances on getting a waiver. But reach out to faculty, reach out to program coordinators, participate in events. I know, for instance, a lot of our programs, do traveling events where if they show up on your campus, you do something virtual, you'll earn a waiver. And so sitting, on a Zoom room for an hour is perfectly worth a $100 waiver, I think. Look for things like priority deadlines and then send emails. The worst thing people can do is say no. But also, you'll notice it's very common for certain things to be automatically waived depending on the institution. So if you have a Pell Grant, if you have fiscal hardship, you'll usually be able to prove that for a free application. We've got another question in there from Jennifer. Would a good letter writer be a scientist I did a 10-week summer research internship with, or is that too short of a time frame to have worked with her to get a good letter? I think that is another 10 out of 10 A+ person you should be getting a letter from because they're going to be able to speak to you, speak to research, and speak to the field. And so if you may feel that your relationship is not as fleshed out as you wanted it to be, consider reaching out. Say, hey, I had a really good time at my internship. I learned a lot and I respect what you do. Do you have a minute for us to hop on a Zoom call and kind of talk about my next steps and following in your footsteps? And yes, Madison, I will share the slides with your leadership and make sure you guys have all of this. And then if you have further questions, like I said, I will be at the grad fair on I think it's 20th. It's not the 20th or 21st. I forget the date already. But I'll be there. So just come find me. And then kind of moving on. Oh, we got one more question and then we'll move on to this slide. Nicole has asked, would it be okay to have a letter from a professor of a different field, industrial engineering when I'm computer science? I think that's also a great idea because they can at least talk from an academic perspective. So if you have maybe not the best letter writers from your specific field, it's better to have people within academia before going to kind of those character witnesses. Um, and then Brianna asked about what should you do if you did not have any internships or research experience and need good rec letters. My biggest piece of advice here is go talk to somebody. Find somebody on your campus that you've worked with or even that you just respect and go tell them that. Sit down and say, hey, Professor Smith, I really, your class on human anatomy really impacted me and I want to go to graduate school. Can you talk to me how you did that? What should I do? How can I be a good candidate? If you get someone talking about themselves, that's going to help to kind of build that exciting relationship and show the impact that they're having on you. And it's never too late to do that. Looking at transcripts, pretty self-explanatory, but there are 2 types of transcripts you need to be aware of. Unofficial, these are usually fine for your application, and that's things like a screenshot of your grades, PDF downloaded from a website, stuff like that. And then official is usually what you need for admission. So if I apply with my unofficial, when I get in, I need to provide an official transcript so they know I wasn't bluffing. Um, Usually you won't need to provide official when you do your actual application, but just be aware that official copies usually cost a few dollars. And if you're requesting an official copy, I always say it's good practice to request 2, one to the school and then one to you, because it's never a bad idea to have a copy of your transcript because you never know when you're going to need that. I can tell you as a professional, I need it way often, and I graduated in 2016. So just a reminder of that. And then last but not least, before we get to questions, what do you do to become a quality candidate? Well, just like everything else we've talked about, it's very different than undergrad. Graduate school is more of a projection and about fit than anything else. I like to compare it a lot to the NFL draft, oddly enough, because if I've got the first overall pick, I'm not solely picking that person because of all of the great things they did in college. There are a lot of players who put up great stats at small schools and all this kind of stuff, but might not be NFL ready or might not be fit for that team or that scheme or anything like that. And that's what grad admissions is. It's taking the information you're sharing about your history and us being able to say, this is a fit for this program. We think you're going to be successful. And that is what matters above everything else. Reviewers want to see your story, so you want to make sure you're telling them what you need to tell them in your statement and making sure your letter writers are filling in the gaps and reflecting the key things in your statement. And then if you're looking to improve your candidacy, top ways you can do that. One, research experience. Two, your letter writers. And that doesn't mean you need to have somebody at the highest office or the NIH or anything else like that to write a letter for you. It means that who's writing your letter needs to know you. So if you work on those relationships, you'll have a more effective application. And then showing your enthusiasm and engaging with the programs, setting up meetings, going to grad schools, talking to recruiters, going to virtual events, faculty talks, stuff like that will show your enthusiasm and could be the thing that puts you above a similarly ranked candidate. Looking step by step as the pathway to graduate school, as an early career student, freshman and sophomore, think about asking questions, attending events like this, but I also want you to really dive deep into yourself. What is your why? What do you need? Where do you want to be? And what are your goals? And make sure grad school is helping that. A lot of students, particularly freshmen and sophomore, only think about grad school because I was really great at high school. I'm really good at undergrad. I don't know anything but school. I'm going to keep going. And then they're caught off guard when it's very different than undergrad. So ask these questions, talk to experts, experts in your field, talk to somebody who went to graduate school, is in graduate school, dropped out of graduate school, decided not to go to graduate school, and learn from all of their perspectives. Start building your network with these experts, and then begin the idea of exploring summer research and internship opportunities at your home school or externally. Industry, education, they're all great. For my juniors, this is when you're going to continue exploring some of these research or internships, start to look at funding so you can attend national conferences as a presenter or even just grad fairs. Start this research process because schools do a lot of things. And you know what? The best way to test out of school is maybe do a research placement there. And then finally, expand your network. Talk to peers of your faculty, talk to different faculty, talk to faculty at different schools. And then seniors, prepare your application, and then pull on this network you spent 3 years building to support that application. And then the last slide that we got, guys, summer research. It's near and dear to my heart because I run a program here on campus, actually two of them, that help to boost your application. What it does is it shows engagement in the field. It shows you have a dedication to research, but more importantly, it shows you know what in the world you're getting yourself into. Um, People want to see that you're ready for graduate school, and the best way to show that is to trial run graduate school for a 10-week research program. If possible, external research is held in a higher regard than internal research. So if you have the ability to do a research placement not at your home institution, that will benefit you a little bit more. Any research is great, but if you have the opportunity between two, push your boundaries a little bit. And then because of this, undergraduate research is often a pipeline of admission. If you look at our programs, about 20% of our students end up coming back to Vanderbilt because they've built that rapport, they have a place, they're doing a great program, and the best way to get admitted is to have that relationship. So I know I'm just throwing a whole lot at you. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and open the floor for questions. Um, and I see we've got one in the chat, so you guys are thinking about those. The question is, they are considering taking a year after I graduate to build their resume and finalize what they want to study. The thesis chair for their honors undergraduate thesis offered to write a letter of recommendation for this admission cycle. Do you think I could use them for the next cycle if I took this year, or is there a certain time limit? I would ask him, of course. I wanted to know what is generally acceptable. I think that is a great idea to speak with them, specifically letting them know your timeline. I would hope that if someone is willing and ready and excited to write you a letter for this year, writing one for next year won't be an issue. Because also we do need to recognize that we might apply to programs and not get in and have to apply in the following year. So it's very common to reuse them. I would just make sure that they're aware of the same timeline. Madison is asked about a postbac or SMP hurt to build your resume to get into Vanderbilt MD. Unfortunately, I cannot speak to the MD review process as that is an entirely separate entity. I will say that in all of graduate education, having additional research, having additional training will never hurt you. Especially if you're, trying to build out your resume or make up for deficiencies or things like that that helps you in the sense of building those qualifications, but also shows that you have a self-understanding and are willing and ready to work on anything you might need to get into whatever program you want. You're welcome. Okay, so James has asked us for preparation, what is your advice for transfer students? I can see it being a combo of freshman and junior slash senior. James, can you elaborate on that? Are you saying you were a transfer student and want to know about impacts on graduate, or more so about transferring graduate programs? And while we wait in that, I think I saw someone come off mute. So if they wanted to ask a question, go ahead while we're waiting for James. All right, cool. While we're waiting for that, kind of taking it. Okay, here's James, current transfer student to UCF and preparing for grad school. Uh, Generally speaking, that really won't have much of an impact. So a lot of students worry about, oh, I transferred from a community college. Are they going to think any differently? Or I spent 1 year here, 1 year here, 1 year here. Quite frankly, that won't really have much of an impact. The only things that might need to be mentioned in your statement would be, if one you transferred from one place because the place before that, blew up on you, grades were bad, you were wrong major, any of that kind of stuff. But beyond that, the only kind of thing you might run into is some schools may require unofficial transcripts from every place you've been, and other schools will just require it from the place you're going to eventually earn your degree. But by and large, transfer students and someone who's completed their whole education in one place are looked on equal footing. So hope that helps with that one. And then Yamari has asked, how would you describe the learning environment there in terms of graduate school? Is it more collaborative or independent? Excuse me. So at Vanderbilt, and I would say graduate school as a whole, it is incredibly collaborative. But that'll be from an academic standpoint. Your day to day will be governed very much on the mentor that you choose. So that is really important for you to ask these questions of your prospective mentors because if you really thrive in a team dynamic or group environment, you want to have a mentor that operates as such that might have group meetings, might have a team building exercise, gets together with everyone quite a lot. Or if you're looking for more of an independent type setup, there's mentors that will operate their labs in that way, where you might see them once every 3 or 4 months, and come together, have your quick conversation, and then dip. So it's very dependent on the PI that you would have. Um, Hope that helped that one. All right, I think we got time for one or two more. So we'll go with Heba and then Brianna, and then we'll cut it. And I'll also put my email in the chat if you guys have any questions. But uh, Heba has asked, I recently graduated from UCF with business economics degree and have been attending grad prep sessions, taking next year off to build my resume and get a designation instead. I didn't stay in touch with my professors after graduating. Do you have any advice on how to reconnect with them for letters of recommendation? Well, first off, congrats on graduating. It's awesome. Secondly, it really kind of relates back to the same answer for a lot of these letter questions, but send them an email. If you happen to be local, offer to buy them coffee. Say, again, similar to what we talked about previously, but hey, you inspired me. I want to follow in your footsteps. You make me excited about this field, and they're bound to want to talk to you. It could be a lunch, it could be a coffee, it could just be a Zoom meeting, but ask them for advice and show them the impact that they had on you. And that's the best way to kind of rekindle things. It might not work 100% of the time. You might get someone who's just like, I don't remember you. I'm busy. I got stuff like that. But most of the people, especially in academia, are going to want to help. So don't get worried about that. Worst thing they can do is say no. But there's more people to reach out to there. And then also, if you're building some of those designations and certifications, people in that realm are also appropriate as we're looking at the business space as well. And then, last question from Brianna. What can you do post undergrad with little research experience to improve your resume? I think that comes down to one thing as the top thing, and that is how are you engaging with the field? So if you don't have research experience, maybe that is an internship. Maybe that is you emailing a faculty member and seeing if they have any research placements. I know a lot of schools hire people just as researchers as a route to prepare them for eventual graduate school. Similarly, I mean, it could be even something that's not super established.